I've returned to my hometown in the deep South, seeking solace from a painful past. The humid air clings to my skin like a damp shroud, weighing me down with every step. It's been years since I left, chasing the ghosts of my childhood and the memories that haunt me still. But as I wander through these familiar streets, I begin to feel an unsettling sense of déjà vu. Every cypress tree seems taller, every Spanish moss-draped bayou more foreboding than I remember. It's as if I'm walking through a waking nightmare, one that I thought I'd left behind. The townspeople seem friendly enough, but there's a subtle unease in their eyes, a sense of watching and waiting. My cousin, Jeb, has invited me to dinner at the family home, a sprawling antebellum mansion on the outskirts of town. He's promised me a warm welcome and a chance to reconnect with the past. But as I approach the house, I notice something strange. The front door is slightly ajar, as if someone had recently passed through it. A shiver runs down my spine, but I push it aside, telling myself it's just my imagination playing tricks on me. After all, I've been away for so long. The memories of our childhood are hazy at best, and the stories my parents used to tell about the old days seem more like tall tales than actual events. Still, something feels off, something that makes me wonder if I'm truly welcome here. As the days pass, I find myself increasingly drawn into the mystery that has been shrouded in secrecy for so long. It begins with small things, a glimpse of a figure lurking in the shadows, a faint scent of incense carried on the breeze, a whispered conversation between two strangers that stops abruptly as they catch sight of me. The townspeople seem to be watching me, their eyes following my every move like hawks waiting for a kill. I try to brush it off as mere paranoia, but deep down, I know better. I've always known about the dark family history that has been passed down through our clan, the whispers of cannibalism and human sacrifice that have long been dismissed as mere local legend. But now, I'm faced with the unsettling reality that these stories may be more than just mere myth. I start to notice strange symbols etched into the trunks of the cypress trees, ancient markings that seem to pulse with a malevolent energy. The air is thick with an otherworldly presence, one that makes my skin crawl and my blood run cold. I begin to suspect that Jeb's family may be more than just ordinary folk, that they may be hiding a dark secret that has been hidden for generations. I try to push the thoughts aside, but they linger in the back of my mind like a festering wound. What if our family history is not just a collection of dusty old stories, but a living, breathing thing that threatens to consume us all? The community's collective memory becomes distorted as witnesses eerie events. Children acting strangely, disembodied whispers, and unsettling visions. The air thickens with an eerie presence. It starts with small things. A child playing in the street, their eyes black as coal, their smile twisted into a grotesque grin. I try to brush it off as mere childhood imagination, but something about it sends a shiver down my spine. The next day, I see a group of teenagers huddled around an old oak tree, their voices hushed and urgent. They glance up at me with eyes that seem to hold a deep sadness, as if they're hiding secrets they can't quite articulate. And then there are the whispers. Faint, raspy whispers that seem to come from all directions at once. I try to listen more closely, but the words always seem just out of reach. The vision starts soon after. Dark, twisted images that make my blood run cold. A child's face contorted in agony, a woman's body hanging from a tree branch like a macabre puppet on a string. The images are so vivid, so real, that I can almost smell the stench of decay and death. As the days pass, the events escalate in intensity and frequency. It's as if something is stirring beneath the surface, waiting for its moment to strike. The air thickens with an eerie presence, one that makes my skin crawl and my heart pound in my chest. I start to wonder if I've made a terrible mistake by coming back to this town, if I should have just stayed away and forgotten about the dark family history. But then something unexpected happens. A glimmer of hope flickers to life in the darkness. One night, as I'm walking home from a late-night gathering at the local diner, I see Jeb's daughter, Emily, standing on the porch of our family home. She looks pale and shaken, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. And then she sees me, and her face contorts into a look of pure terror. "What's wrong?" I ask, my voice barely above a whisper. She takes a step back, her eyes darting around the darkness as if searching for something to hide behind. "I saw it," she says, her voice trembling. "I saw it in the attic." The attic. The very thought of it sends a shiver down my spine. What could be lurking up there? And what does Emily's revelation have to do with anything? The air is heavy with the scent of decay and death as I stand at the edge of the bayou, the murky waters reflecting the twisted trees that loom above. A figure emerges from the shadows, its presence both captivating and terrifying. The wind whispers secrets in my ear, drawing me deeper into the heart of the swamp. I feel a shiver run down my spine as I realize that this is no ordinary figure. It's as if the very essence of the bayou has taken form, coalescing into a being that embodies the darkest aspects of human nature. The figure takes a step closer, its eyes burning with an otherworldly intensity. I can feel its gaze piercing through me, searching for something deep within my soul. "Who are you?" I demand, trying to keep my voice steady despite the fear that's rising up inside me. The figure doesn't respond, but instead takes another step closer. Its presence is like a cold wind that cuts through my very being, leaving me feeling chilled to the bone. "I am the one who has been awakened," it hisses, its voice like the rustling of leaves in the bayou's depths. "And you, dear, are the one who must pay for your family's sins." I take a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. What do I mean by sins? What secrets has our family kept hidden for so long? The figure takes another step closer, its eyes blazing with an unholy light. "You see, dear," it says, its voice dripping with malevolence, "your family's history is not just a simple tale of blood and fire. No, it's much deeper than that. It's a web of deceit and betrayal that stretches back generations, a tangled mess of secrets and lies. And at the center of it all is your own dark legacy, the one that you've tried to keep hidden, even from yourself." The figure takes another step closer, its breath hot on my skin. "Now come with me," it says, its voice dripping with menace. "Let's take a journey into the heart of your own darkness." I intrigued and deepened my quest as uncovered evidence of the cult's influence within local government. Corruption and manipulation seeped into every layer of society, leaving questioning everything they thought they knew about their town. I had always believed that our community was a place of trust and integrity, but now it seemed like nothing was as it appeared. The more I dug, the more I realized that the cult's reach was far more extensive than I could have ever imagined. It wasn't just a group of isolated individuals. It was a web of power and influence that had infiltrated every level of our society. I began to question everything. The politicians who claimed to represent our interests, the business leaders who profited from the town's growth, even the police officers who were supposed to protect us. It seemed like no one was immune to the cult's grasp. As I delved deeper into the mystery, I started to notice strange occurrences everywhere. Neighbors who had once been friendly now seemed distant and suspicious. Friends who had been there for me in times of need now seemed to be hiding secrets. Even my own family seemed to be affected, as if they were being pulled into the cult's orbit without even realizing it. I felt like I was living in a nightmare, where nothing made sense and everyone seemed to be playing a role. The more I uncovered, the more I realized that the cult's influence was not just about manipulation, it was also about control. They had created a culture of fear and intimidation, where people were too afraid to speak out or question the status quo. And at the heart of it all was a mysterious figure known only as the leader, who seemed to be pulling the strings from behind the scenes. I knew that I had to get to the bottom of this, no matter what it took. But as I dug deeper, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that the leader was waiting for me to make my next move. The echoes of the past were growing louder, and I knew that I was running out of time. As tensions rise, begins to experience terrifying visions, echoes of the past that hint at the true extent of the cult's depravity. The veil between reality and madness starts to fray. I saw her again, the woman who had disappeared in the bayou all those years ago. Her eyes were black as coal and her skin was deathly pale. She whispered a single word in my ear: "Run." But where could I run? This was my family's town, and I knew every inch of it. The visions grew more vivid, more real, and I began to question everything I thought I knew about the cult and its true intentions. They were not just a group of fanatics. They were a well-oiled machine, with tentacles that reached into every level of society. And at the heart of it all was a web of bloodlines and betrayal that went back generations. I saw glimpses of my own family's past, moments of joy and love that had been twisted and corrupted by the cult's influence. My grandmother, who had always seemed so kind and gentle, was revealed to be a high-ranking member of the cult. And my father, who had taught me everything I knew about the bayou, was shown to be secretly working for the group. The visions were both exhilarating and terrifying, leaving me questioning what was real and what was just a product of my own fevered imagination. But one thing was certain: I had stumbled into something much bigger than myself, and I needed to get out before it was too late. Nightmares become all too real as is stalked by an unseen presence. Every step outside feels like a betrayal, and trust in others is shattered. The darkness seems to move of its own accord, twisting and writhing like a living thing. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, even when I knew I was alone. The trees seemed to loom over me, their branches grasping like skeletal fingers. Every creak of a twig or snap of a twig made me jump, my heart racing with fear. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, but the feeling persisted. It was as if the very darkness itself was alive, and it was coming for me. I couldn't remember the last time I had slept through the night without waking up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. The visions continued, each one more vivid and real than the last. I saw myself walking down a dark alleyway, pursued by an unseen figure with eyes that glowed like embers from hell. I tried to run, but my feet felt heavy, as if rooted to the spot. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. The visions ceased, and the darkness receded back into the shadows. But the feeling of being watched lingered, a constant presence that made me feel like I was living in a state of perpetual siege. I knew I had to get out of there, but every step outside felt like a betrayal. Every person I passed on the street seemed to be watching me, their eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. I couldn't trust anyone anymore, not even myself. The world had become a dark and twisted place, where nothing was as it seemed, and the line between reality and madness was constantly blurred. I had been tracking the cult for weeks, following a trail of clues and leads that seemed to lead me deeper into the heart of darkness. The rituals had become more brazen, with gruesome human sacrifices taking place under the twisted cypress trees. I knew I was getting close, but every step felt like a betrayal. The air was thick with the stench of death and decay, and I could feel the weight of the unknown pressing down on me like a physical force. I finally found myself standing in front of the cult's hideout, a twisted, nightmarish place that seemed to be alive and pulsing with malevolent energy. The trees loomed above me, their branches grasping like skeletal fingers. I knew I had to be careful, but I also knew I couldn't turn back now. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, my heart pounding in my chest. As I entered the hideout, I was met with a sight that made my blood run cold. The cult members were gathered around a large, ritualistic circle, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly energy. In the center of the circle, a figure lay bound and gagged, their eyes pleading for mercy. I knew I had to act fast, but every move felt like it was being watched by unseen hands. The cult members turned towards me, their faces twisted into grotesque grins. They seemed to be enjoying my presence, and I knew I was in grave danger. But I also knew I couldn't let them get away with this. I had to expose the truth, no matter what the cost. The figure in the center of the circle seemed to sense my gaze, and they looked up at me with a desperate plea for help. I nodded, and then stepped forward, ready to face whatever horrors lay ahead. In a desperate bid to escape, flees into the bayou, only to find themselves trapped by the cult's sinister network of informants. Every attempt at rescue ends in failure. The water was cold and murky, but I didn't hesitate. I had to get out of there no matter what. I paddled furiously with my hands, feeling the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I had been running for what felt like hours, the bayou's twisted cypress trees blurring together as I fled from the cult's grasp. But no matter how far I went, I knew they would find me. They always did. I finally reached a small clearing where I collapsed onto the damp earth, gasping for breath. I looked around, hoping to spot some sign of rescue, but the only sound was the water lapping against the shore. I waited, my eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of life. But as the minutes ticked by, I began to feel a creeping sense of dread. Where was everyone? Why wasn't anyone coming for me? And then I saw them, a figure lurking just beyond the tree line. My heart sank, and I knew I was trapped. The cult had set a trap, and I was their prey. I tried to run, but my legs were leaden with fear. Every step felt like it was being weighed down by an invisible force. I stumbled forward, my eyes fixed on the figure as they began to move closer. They were surrounded by others, all of them watching me with cold, calculating eyes. I knew I was in grave danger. The last thing I remembered was the feeling of their hands closing around my wrists, pulling me back into the darkness. When I came to, I was lying on a makeshift bed, surrounded by the cult's twisted symbols and artifacts. They had caught me, and now I was theirs. Every attempt at rescue ended in failure. The bayou seemed to stretch on forever, a seemingly endless expanse of water and darkness that trapped me like a prisoner. I knew I would never escape. The cult had won, and I was just another pawn in their twisted game of survival. The darkness closed in around me, suffocating me with its crushing weight. I was trapped, and there was no way out. The last thing I heard was the sound of my own screams, echoing through the bayou's empty waters like a death knell. I stood face to face with the leader of the cult, their own kin or long-lost relative. The air was thick with tension as they gazed at me, their eyes piercing through the darkness. I felt a shiver run down my spine as they began to speak, their voice low and hypnotic. "You have been chosen," they said, their words dripping with an otherworldly significance. "Chosen for what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The leader's eyes seemed to bore into my soul, their gaze unnerving me. "To join us," they replied, their smile twisting into a grotesque grin. "To join our family." I took a step back, my mind racing with the implications. What did they mean by our family? and what lay ahead for me if I chose to join them. The leader's eyes seemed to bore deeper into mine as if searching for something hidden within. "You have a choice to make," they said finally, their voice dripping with menace. "To be loyal to our cause or to survive on your own." The weight of the decision hung in the balance, and I felt my heart heavy with foreboding. What did it mean to be loyal? And what was the cost of survival? The leader's eyes seemed to hold a secret, one that only they knew. I hesitated, torn between two paths, loyalty and family ties or survival and freedom. But as I looked into their eyes, I saw something there that chilled me to the bone, a hunger for power, a desire to consume all in their path. And I knew then that I had to make a choice, no matter how perilous it might be. As the stakes escalate, becomes trapped within a maze of illusions. What is real and what is just a product of the cult's mind games becomes impossible to discern. The air was thick with the scent of decay and rot, and I knew I was being herded towards some unknown fate. The leader's eyes seemed to gleam with a malevolent light as they guided me deeper into the heart of the cult's lair. Every step felt like a betrayal, as if I was walking further down a path from which there was no return. The walls seemed to close in around me, the shadows deepening into dark, living things that reached out to snare me. I stumbled, my foot catching on some hidden trap, and fell hard onto the cold, damp earth. As I looked up, I saw the leader's face looming over me, their features twisted into a grotesque grin. "You should not have come here," they hissed, their voice like a snake slithering through the grass. "Now you will play our game." The world around me began to distort and twist, like a reflection in rippling water. I felt my grip on reality begin to slip, as if I was drowning in a sea of madness. What was real and what was just a product of the cult's mind games became impossible to discern. Was I walking down a path, or was it the path that was walking me? The leader's voice echoed in my ear, a mantra of confusion and terror. "You are ours now," they whispered. "Forever." The darkness closed in around me, a shroud of shadows that seemed to have a life of their own. I was trapped, lost in a maze of illusions from which there was no escape. I stood at the edge of the bayou, the cypress trees looming above me like sentinels. The cult's leader stood before me, their eyes blazing with an otherworldly intensity. "You have reached the end," they said, their voice dripping with malice. "The final confrontation." I felt a sense of trepidation wash over me as I gazed into their eyes. What lay beyond the cypress shore, and what horrors awaited me there? The leader's smile twisted into a grotesque grin. "You have been chosen to face your own darkness," they said, their voice dripping with menace. "To confront the fears that lurk within." I felt my heart racing as I took a step forward into the unknown. The world around me began to distort and twist like a reflection in rippling water. The cypress trees seemed to close in around me, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. I stumbled, my foot catching on some hidden trap, and fell hard onto the muddy bank. As I looked up, I saw the leader's face looming over me, their eyes burning with an inner fire. "You will never escape," they hissed, their voice echoing in my ear. "You will never be free." The darkness closed in around me, a shroud of shadows that seemed to have a life of their own. I felt myself being pulled down into the depths of madness. And yet, even as I fell, I knew that I was not alone. The cult's leader stood beside me, their hand reaching out to guide me further down the path of terror. Together, we would dance in the darkness, our footsteps echoing through eternity. The cypress trees seemed to whisper a chilling reminder. Some terrors are forever woven into the fabric of one's own soul.